Welcome to the Getting Started with SharePoint Framework tutorial series, and in this video we'll be concentrating on how to surface your SharePoint Framework solution as Microsoft Teams tab. And this is a capability which was released to the developer preview in November 2018. So it's not ready still for production usage, but you can already test it in the developer environments and development experiences, and then provide Microsoft feedback around the capability itself. So we're able to get the missing options and missing capabilities and functionalities for you when this is going general availability worldwide into production usage. So this video has been recorded in November 2018. We will please do remember that the written format of the tutorial is always the most up-to-date tutorial. The videos are updated slightly more rarely, just because of the logistics on getting these videos out. So, but let's actually concentrate on the tutorial itself, and let's actually start by creating us a folder, which we will then actually provision or scaffold our solution. So let's actually create a folder called Teams tab web part. So we are creating a SharePoint Framework solution which works as a SharePoint Framework web part or as a Microsoft Teams tab. So basically we are creating a solution which can be then surfaced as a web part or surfaced as a Microsoft Teams tabs, and that's really the right way of thinking that. So let me actually go to the Teams folder, which we just created, the solution folder, and then let's call Microsoft SharePoint and -- plus beta, and we're using -- plus beta there so that we will scaffold the solution using the plus beta release, which means that we will have dev preview capabilities available when we are scaffolding, when we start developing on top of the scaffolded solution. And this will then, first of all, start the normal standard SharePoint Framework human generator, and we can actually use the basic settings. So let's see what the tutorial is actually saying. Use the default name. We're targeting SharePoint Online, obviously in this case. We're using the current folder. We want actually this to get released tenant-wide, so we're using the tenant scope deployment option. This has an impact in the Teams development, so it really is around where do I need to install the solution. So if I would answer a no on this, we would there's certain other options available to get the solution available only to a specific channel. Now that we answer yes, and it means that the solution and the web part will be visible also in SharePoint side in all of the sites. So that's one downside of using the tenant scope deployment. Well, it's a good capability for getting the web parts available, but in certain cases might be that you don't want to have the web part available in all of the sites. Now, the second question is around the domain isolation and isolated web part. So we're going to answer no on that one. We're going to implement a normal web part in this case, and let's call that web part as my first Teams tab, because it's not technically a web part when we're adding that to the Teams. It is actually a web part when it's actually visible in the SharePoint site. And let's call my first Teams tab as the description for the web part. We're not going to use any framework here. You could use React or Knockout as a starting point, like typically with SharePoint Framework, or you could just as well also use the PMB Yeoman generator, which gives you, for example, capabilities like Angular elements, templating, and handlebars, and so on. Now, the scaffolding takes a few minutes, or it might take 30 seconds or a few minutes, depending on your computer and network capacity. So we're going to speed up the video to get the scaffolding completed in this case. And there we go. Now the scaffolding is completed, and we can actually have a look on the code. So how does this code look in practice? So let's have a look on the solution itself. So I'm going to slightly again zoom this so we get it more visible for you. Now, the new thing here, starting from SharePoint Framework 1.7, is that we actually have this Teams folder available here, and this is actually containing the automatically configured Teams manifest. So if you are familiar familiar with Teams, you probably know what is a Teams manifest for the tabs, but if you're not, this basically defines the URL which is hosting the tab. So in the Teams, when you're clicking a tab, that is technically an iframe, and in that iframe we are then loading a URL or a page. That could be a page hosted in Azure, it could be a page hosted in any location. In this case, because we want to take and we want to simplify the deployment and hosting, it's going to be on the SharePoint side behind of the scenes, behind of the Teams, which was created for the team itself. Now, in this page, in this file, we have automatically configured everything, so you don't actually need to worry about what's in the file, but you can absolutely configure this in multiple ways. You can change the values, you can change the accent colors and all of that. Configuration URL is important, so you shouldn't be messing around with this one technically. You shouldn't typically change anything on a configuration URL. This has been automatically configured to have the component ID matching to the component which was created in your solution. So you don't really technically have to worry about that stuff. And we also have valid domains available in here. The SharePoint.com is available as a listed domain and all of that. So we're kind of ready to go with this one. And then we have two different images, and these are the images which will be then visible in the app catalog in the Teams site. So whenever we are deploying this solution or an application to the Teams, those are then the icons which define how it will be visible for the end users. Now, we're not going to actually, we don't need to explicitly do anything special related on the fact that we want to surface this in Teams. So let's actually close the manifest so we don't have to modify anything. Let's go to the web part, but let's take advantage of the scope of the web part. So where is it actually being presented? So as part of the beta bits of 1.7, you actually have the Microsoft Teams context capabilities in the web part through the this.context and Microsoft Teams. So this is basically giving an access for you to the Microsoft Teams JavaScript SDK, and from there you're able to then get the additional context information, like what is the channel name, what is the team name, what is whatever additional information you might be interested in. So what we're doing technically here is that we are storing that Teams context in a private variable, and then we want to actually take that into account when we render. So I'm going to get rid of the existing render, just following up on the tutorial, and I'm going to copy a new render and paste that one in here. So let's quickly have a look on what do we do in the render method. So first of all, we are checking is, do we have a Teams context? And so this is basically there to decide, are we in a Teams context or not? So the Teams context means that there's a certain query parameters, and then we're able to get additional information on the Teams, like the Teams name and channel name. In this case, what we want to do, if we are in Teams, we're saying welcome to Teams and building custom enterprise tabs for your enterprise, for your business, and we are in context of following Teams. So we're technically presenting the team name then in the UI. If we're not in the context of Teams, we are in the context of SharePoint. So therefore, actually we want to render that welcome to SharePoint, and then we want to render the title of that particular site where we're being hosted as a web part. And then there's a relatively typical rendering of welcome then to SharePoint or welcome to Teams, and that's it. So super simple web part, but it demonstrates you how to get access on the Teams context in a most simplistic way. Good. We're not going to do any development, or sorry, we're not going to do any debugging on this one. So let's actually immediately do packaging. So I'm going to do call bundle -- ship. So basically what's happening now is that we are creating, or we're what's the right word? We're creating those JavaScript files based on our TypeScript files and creating the SPPKG file, which then includes all of our assets. So we don't have to worry about where our application actually is being hosted, because it is hosted in SharePoint. So we're taking advantage of the asset packaging capability in the SharePoint framework to include all of these assets, include the output of this output of our TypeScript, which is then in JavaScript, inside of the SPPKG file. And the bundling basically with the ship option means that we are getting ready for packaging, and let's actually do the packaging as well. So call package solution -- ship means that we are actually properly setting all of the URLs, and we're going to use the Office 365 CDN if it's enabled. If it's not enabled, we're referencing those JavaScript assets directly from App Catalog. Anyway, it's completely transparent, so you as a developer or the person who's deploying doesn't need to worry about if the CDN is enabled or not. And notice, we don't need to actually worry about where the assets are being hosted. They're just automatically, so to say, hosted in SharePoint. So now what happened with the package solution is that we actually created here the SharePoint folder. Inside of the SharePoint folder, we can actually see the SPP.kg file. So this is now the packaged solution, which includes the JavaScript files. And if you're interested in what that actually includes, it is a zip file, or so you can actually open that in a archive viewers, or you can extend the debug folder in your solution, and that actually shows everything what's inside of the SPP.kg file, including the JavaScript files and the business logic of the web part. So technically, this is why we don't need to worry about where do we host our Microsoft Tabs stuff, because we use the asset packaging. The assets are getting packaged inside of the SPP.kg file, and we don't need to worry about where the stuff is being hosted. It is just hosted automatically inside of the SharePoint, so to say. Now let's actually go back in the command line. I'm going to open Explorer in that folder. And we are interested on getting that SPP.kg file deployed in our developer tenant. So let me actually open up my developer tenant here. So let me go to the SharePoint app catalog. Let me go to the apps for SharePoint. And in here, now that our solution with JavaScript files and everything else is available and packaged, I'm going to drag and drop that one in my app catalog and paste that one in. That is now getting deployed. By default, as part of the Yeoman questions, we actually answered that we want this to be a tenant scope deployed web part, which makes the deployment easy. A web part is automatically available across the whole SharePoint tenant. There are, like I said, multiple other options available, but this is the easiest way to get started. So I'm going to click that checkbox, clicking deploy. And voila, our web part is now available. So let's actually double check that it's seriously available. So let me go to a normal SharePoint communication site, which has some example content, at least an example or a changed image. And I'm going to add a page here. And let's get rid of the header and let's add a page, and let's call our search for a web part called Themes, or which has the themes in it. And it says My First Themes tab. But because it is technically also a web part, so it's a solution which is being surfaced as a web part or as a Microsoft Teams tab, it actually is available as a web part and a functionality in here as well. Now, if you don't want it to be available, like I said, you can filter the visibility using where do you deploy it and where do you activate that to be available. But as you can see, it's aware that it's in SharePoint, and we're in the context of following site called comms, and this site name is comms. So it is a kind of aware what's happening. It has the same web part parameterization like any web part. That's SharePoint Framework, so that's quite typical of a SharePoint Framework implementation. Now, making that same web part then available and surfaced in Teams, what do we need to do? Now, first of all, we need to make sure that our site loading is enabled in a tenant level. And this is something which you need to do once in your developer tenant, so that you're able to then activate those applications, Microsoft Teams applications in your tenant. So let's go to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, Settings, Services and Add-ins. In here, I will open up the Microsoft Teams, and because we want to configure the Microsoft Teams functionality. There's tenant-wide settings, and we can see the apps section in here. And if we extend that, we can see an option which says allow site loading of external apps. And this is really around, do you allow uploading of a custom application to individual teams using the Teams management capabilities. So in our case, in the developer tenant, we're going to enable that. So it gives us then the capability in all of the teams inside of the Microsoft Teams. So let's save that. There we go, updating team settings. Team settings have been updated. Cool. So now we have the capability in Teams. So we're able to technically upload inside of this team called Awesome. We're able to upload our customizations in. Now, we still need to create that manifest. We still need to create the application file so that Teams is aware what is the URL where stuff is being served. So inside of the teams, even though we deployed our solution in the SharePoint app catalog, it doesn't mean that we have it available here as an option when we start adding the functionality. So we still explicitly, at least in the dev preview, will need to deploy this application either the tenant, Microsoft Teams tenant catalog, or in the catalog at the team level. So in our case, we're going to use the manage team functionality. And because we enabled the site loading, it means that in the apps tab, we can see this upload custom app in the bottom right corner. So the site loading enablement basically gave us this option in here. But still we need to create the file which we actually gonna package, and that one we're gonna create manually. But we don't, well, technically it's created for us already, but we need to package that manually. So in the Teams folder, we can see that we have the Teams manifest.json, which we don't need to modify, and we have the example images. If you want to change the images, you can change the images, and you can change the settings inside of the manifest.json. I'm going to actually compress this as a zip file, and let's call this my cool Teams app. And there we go. And let me then actually take that path. Let me go to the Teams. Let me upload that custom application. Let me actually go to the right folder. Let me upload that to the Teams. And in this case, the contents of the zip file is getting validated. We can see that it's a My First Teams tab in this case, and it's available to be used in the channel. Now it's uploaded in here, so we're able to actually get it visible. If we click the plus, our customization is visible to be added as a tab in that channel. So because we uploaded that to the catalog, it is now available to be added on the channel as well. And as you can see, and as we add it in the channel, we're able to see that there are exactly the same configuration options as we have for the web part. And if we click save, we can actually see that web part content being rendered in the context of Teams with the information of Teams. So it is actually saying we are in the context of following team, awesome, and that is matching correctly on the Teams name. So it's aware of the context of the Teams, and that's really, really cool. So now you have one piece of one solution which is surfaced in two different locations, either as a web part or as a Microsoft Teams application. And that concludes this video. So please give us feedback. This capability is in dev preview starting from early November 2018, and we're looking into going general availability based on obviously the feedback what you're giving us and addressing that feedback. There are things where we need to still improve here and there and make the development and deployment process even more simplified, but comparing to the, let's say, classic way of implementing Microsoft Teams tabs, where you need to worry about the hosting, where you need to worry about permissions and everything else and getting access, for example, to Azure subscriptions, this is significantly easier from a hosting and deployment perspective. And obviously, if you're a SharePoint Framework developer, you can now also implement super easily Microsoft Teams tabs or technically surfacing your web part or a business solution as a web part or as a Microsoft Teams tab. But that's all we're going to do in this video. So thank you for watching, and please keep the feedback coming. Thank you.